when you look at this roster, is there anything that flies under the radar about it, whether it's a strength or concern that you just don't think is receiving enough attention right now?
A strength or a concern? I guess the asset chest, right? Like, and this is not the roster per se, but it's the team. Like, their war chest is kind of insane, and they built it back up again, right? Like, but by pushing the timeline of these picks, they got more picks from Phoenix, right? Um, I loved that trade. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it at the time. I loved it. I still love it now. I think people were looking at that trade as like, I don't know why Woj was tweeting about Kevin Durant. I think that influenced the way people thought about that trade. And I think he was just speculating. I really do think he was just speculating. And because the next tweet he got, he backtracked. And then on TV, he backtracked again when he was asked about it.
I can't imagine Woj publicly speculate. The Devin Booker, by the way, is the name that caught my attention when he was tweeting about Devin Booker.
That's real.
Yeah, because it almost felt like was Kevin Durant used this cover to be like, oh, I'm just not going to mention Booker because Woj doesn't. He used to, but he won't do that anymore. Like he is too ingrained into like having to maintain these relationships that I don't think he says. Maybe he didn't realize, like maybe he didn't mean to say it, but like it was pretty, like it wasn't an accidental tweet. So
no, I mean, like, I don't want to cut you off, but like, this is what I think happened. The Rockets sniffed around because they always sniff around, right? They sniffed around with Kevin Durant. They sniffed around. They've had interest in Kevin Durant. They tried to sign him in 2017 when Harden was.
And also, not to interrupt you, but like Stone comes from the Daryl Morey front office school of we're just going to throw shit, like call every team about every single player that we want.
Annoy everybody, right? Yeah, like piss everybody off. Call about. We're gonna call you about Giannis, right? Like that's just what they do, right? Like they're gonna do that because it doesn't hurt you, right? Like you may say, oh, you're annoying the guy. Who cares if he's annoyed? If he wants to make a trade with you that benefits his team, he's still gonna make a trade with you that benefits his team, right? Otherwise, he's terrible at his job, right? I think they sniffed around this summer, and then he tried connecting the dots himself. I think that was dot connecting.
Okay.
And then because immediately the tweet that followed was like, "Oh, they may not be." I don't remember the tweet exactly, but it was like pretty severe backtracking. And then he was asked about it on SportsCenter, like that night. He dodged the question. I think he got a text from the Rockets, like, "Hey, that's not what we're doing, pal." Like no, right? Like because it makes no sense either. Like logically. Let's just say, let's take my speculation that he was speculating aside, right? Logically, does it make any sense that they were going after that this trade was about Kevin Durant? No. Right?
No,
maybe
he's entering his age 36 season. That trade was not about Kevin Durant.
Right. Like I think this really was just about the assets that they got. I mean, like what happened was New York saw an opportunity to go get Mikal Bridges. Brooklyn's like, we're not trading Mikal Bridges while we don't have our own draft picks. And they called Houston, and Houston offered them this trade before, right? Like, hey, we at the trade deadline, they threw this trade like, hey, we like those Phoenix picks that you have. We'll take those off your hands if you want your picks back. So at the time, the Nets didn't find it appetizing. But once they got a deal from Mikal Bridges that they really liked, they're like, okay, let's go. We're going to take you up on that offer so we can execute this trade. That's exactly what happened.
Right. I want to make it clear. I probably would have made the trade too if I'm Houston, because to me, it is a gamble, and a gamble I would have made, but it's a gamble in the sense that I do think that they got to a point with the Mikal Bridges return, they would have made that trade anyway with New York. And so you can look at it as if you're Houston and you are plotting something big, huge, massive, which I don't know if they're plotting it, but they're clearly like they're stockpiling shit for it if the opportunity arises. The imminency of draft picks matters because most front offices do not have the job security to say, if it's this trade deadline, if it's next summer, I'm placing a ton of value on a 2029 first round pick or beyond, just because the job security isn't there. With that being said, you did get so much stuff where it's like you basically acquired the rights to 3 Phoenix Suns picks when you look at the way the swaps are going to play out.
And Stone got an extension, right?
Right. And I'm saying the Rockets might be and also they have enough talent to where it's, well, we're still trying to figure things out. These Nets picks have a drive the car off the lot, like, because they're going to convey within the next couple of years. And by the way, they still did keep the 2027 like control. So like that's still interesting as well.
Yeah.
But I do think, and again, I would have made the trade. I want to make that clear, but I do think people are kind of underselling that, oh, Brooklyn would have been so good. Like people are going to look at it as, oh, did Houston just give away the third pick or whatever the Nets get? And maybe it's not that extreme, but there is a higher possibility that the Nets would have conveyed a top 5 pick to Houston during one of those, because I really do believe that they either one just wouldn't have been good because there was no trade out there for them to get immediately better to the point where they would have just nuked the value of those picks that Houston had. And two, I think they got to a point where the Knicks gave them so much stuff. Had Houston just said no, the Mikal Bridges trade gets done. Anyway, again,
I disagree.
That's fine. That's fair.
I don't think a world in which the Nets trade Mikal Bridges and the Rockets still own these picks was ever on the table. The reason I say that is, I mean, it's pretty clear if that happens. I mean, if you're an owner, you should look at it objectively, right? You shouldn't do what I'm about to say, right? But doesn't it feel like Sean Marks is on the tail to lose his job if he gives up? If this franchise that just did this 10 years ago gives up another top 3, gives up 2 back-to-back top 5 picks to an organization when they're in the tank, like again, if they do that again, doesn't that feel like something that could lose Sean Marks' job? Right? Like I don't think it should. To be clear, because you're right, that is a lot of value. You should look at it as a sunk cost. But
my whole thing is that if Sean Marks' job really was in jeopardy, you don't have the agency to do what he just did, which is start a rebuild by getting your picks back from Houston.
It's easier when you get your picks back, though.
It's easier to sell, but if his job was really, like, he clearly has the latitude to operate. And I think it's also universally understood that the organization itself made a misstep when they accepted the whole star thing. And so the fact that also Sean Marks has experience rebuilding without his own picks, because he did that when he first came to Brooklyn, I think that probably would have given him even more agency over. Again, we're splitting hairs over whether.
Yeah,
well, I don't think the Rockets.
I say that to say, like, I mean, like, yeah, I'll get us back on track. Like, I loved that trade, right? Like,
which is, I did too. I thought it was a smart gamble, and it kicked the can in a way of one of these picks. Let's use the 2025 one as an example. That's going to be a player next summer. That player is inherently less valuable because it's an actual player than this Phoenix selection in 2027 could be anything.
Yeah, well, and also, like, let's take your frame to be true. Let's say they do accept that Nets trade and trade away Mikal Bridges, and Houston decides to turn around and, okay, we know that you don't have Mikal Bridges. We're still going to do this trade anyways with you after the fact that you just traded away Mikal Bridges, and we know that this net pick is going to be extremely valuable. Let's say they did that, right? Which I don't think, like, again, I don't think that world was possible, but let's just say it was. Okay, so you're giving up a top 5 pick next year, in all likelihood, because that's how bad Brooklyn's going to be this year.
Yeah.
And the next year possibly again, right? What are you going to do with 2 more top 5 picks? Like, how are you going to optimize those guys?
I mean, if one of them's Cooper Flag, you figure it out, obviously. But
maybe, right? But you don't know that, and it's a 13% chance that is Cooper Flag at best, right? And also, you have no breathing room to develop any of these talents.
Right.
And you kicking the can down the road, and you're getting assets back with the Phoenix trade.
I guess my read on it was they made this trade because of how tied it is to one team with a very specific player in mind, or they're gaming it. So Devin Booker being the one, in which case it would shock me if Jalen Green is on this team past the trade deadline. Not that they're going to get Devin Booker, but if that's like the apple of, and which is fair just because Devin Booker's in his prime, but like KD's not, even though he's still really good and he's going to be a free agent soon. Bradley Beal, still good, not in his prime. Or it's just like they wanted distant first for what you said, because one, it's harder to groom talents that are coming in, but two, those picks are more valuable if you're really playing the long game here. Not 2025, not 2026, but like we're kind of waiting on like Giannis becoming available in Milwaukee. And so that's why I think it's smart, but it does, I guess where I think Woj was onto something, and I don't think it was Kevin Durant. I 100% agree with you there. They made this trade to me where there feels like maybe there's a list of up to 4 players, but like this trade was made with no more than 3 or 4 players in mind. That was just my read on it because I really do believe that the Nets would have made the Mikal Bridges trade anyway. In which case, if you're Houston, you deal with the problem of having another top 5 pick when you have it. Like that's a great problem to have.
I'll say this: I do agree that the Nets should have made the Mikal Bridges trade anyways, right? Like I do think they should have been viewing this as a sunk cost. Their verbiage, I mean, what they were saying to the media seems to indicate that they were worried about the optics of this, right? Like because they were talking about keeping Mikal Bridges and looking for the star that complements him. What the
Well,
hell
I
are
do
you
think
talking about him?
the Donovan Mitchell extension talks feel like it pushed the Nets over the edge because like that was kind of the guy where it's like, well, he might just want to go to New York and he doesn't care if it's not the Knicks. So
Right,
like
but
maybe
what
that
is that getting you? Like Mikal Bridges and Donovan. Like, okay, I get like
that's also my point here is where was if that's how you feel about Donovan Mitchell, Mikal Bridges, how do you feel about a team that's just built around Mikal Bridges then? Just
yeah, I mean, so it was just weird. It was just weird with what they were saying. But I also do think part of it may have been leverage, right? Leveraging that, like, hey, we're comfortable standing pat, even though a lot of people may call bullshit, right? Like, yo, you're really gonna build around have fun, pal, right? But the Knicks clearly didn't feel that way. So I don't know. It's tough to know. It's tough to know,
I get
and chances are we'll never know because we can't interview. Like they're not going to be honest about this. Brooklyn's never going to be honest about the idea about. Oh, they'll probably say what you're saying, which is like we would have made this trade anyways, right? Because it makes them look good, right?
I guess my overarching question to you though is like, do you believe that the trade that Houston, this is Houston's perspective, they made this move with specific players in mind, or that they made this move to just keep themselves flexible slash like flush more distant into the future because they're trying to not delay making that call, but just again, it's more about flexibility because those picks were more imminently going to convey, which in their case, as you outlined, I don't want to use the word problematic, but it would have been more of a logistical issue.
I would say more so the latter, but
Okay.
Devin Booker is an ancillary benefit. Like the Rockets knew, right? They're not naive, right? They're not a dumb organization. They're not they it was a side benefit for them. It's like okay, like we also have this over them, right? And now we hold this over another franchise.
Well, and you just saw how much a franchise will give up to get back its own picks with
Yeah,
Brooklyn. I will say to transition back into like other stuff, I do hate and I love transactions. People who say that transactions are stupid, I think that they're lame. I think everyone can root for the game how they want to, but it does kind of. I don't necessarily like viewing the Rockets through that lens. They're just so fucking talented as currently constructed, but it's also a reality of what we've circled back to 9 times over on this podcast is just you have so many guys that you know you're not going to pay. And it's not even a matter of paying them, by the way. It's you've used this word a few times. How do you optimize all of these guys together? And the answer is you probably can't.
right. And this trade, like I know we want to focus on like enjoying the Rockets, but this trade in a lot of ways allows us to enjoy the Rockets, right? Because you're not getting more players coming in through the draft, right?
It's a really good point.
Yeah, and like I think this kind of gives like I use this word a lot in my write up for this, right? Breathing room, this phrase, right? Breathing room. That's what this trade was about. Breathing room. Let this roster breathe.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why they didn't do anything this summer. They want this roster to breathe, and that data, that whatever comes from this, right? That will inform what they do next with the Phoenix picks, with the players they have on roster. But I think if you're gonna ask me to take it back to your question, the under discussed topic with this Rockets team is the bounty of assets that they have. When you combine the players with the picks, I put them up against anybody aside from Oklahoma City. I think Oklahoma City probably has them beat, right? But
Oh, yeah.
I mean, other than that, even Utah, I think they have a case because Utah might have more picks, but
Those
Houston
teams are
has,
good. And they're like Cleveland's built to sustain, even Minnesota and so young.
yeah,
And by the way, what you mentioned though is interesting with the young players. It does get to a point where like, and that's why I would almost bet on a like kind of a major move coming within like the next season and a half. Those guys become inherently less valuable as they get closer to their next contracts. And like now we're entering the phase of okay, it's Alperen Şengün and Jalen Green now. Next year it's Tari Eason and Jabari Smith Jr. and then Amen Thompson and Cam Whitmore right after him. And so like this stuff is going to happen. Like it's happening now. Like you're rendering like really important wholesale directional verdicts like beginning right now because of just the stage of the careers that these players are entering.
If the Rockets didn't get if they kept the Brooklyn pick and they didn't get I'm sorry, who what's his name? I'm forgetting his name.
Cooper Flag.
If they kept the pick and they didn't get, I'd feel kind of gross. Like you know when you had like a heavy meal, right? And like someone brings like a plate of cheesecake over, it's like I can't. Like it's too much.
I'll never say no to cheesecake, but yeah,
it's too much, right? Like I'm stuffed. I don't know what to do with this food.
And to
right?
your point, if people, I will never frame it that way entirely, where if the Nets end up getting Cooper Flag because they get the number 1 pick, that outcome was made far more likely because they own their own pick. I want to make that absolutely clear. I don't view it as the Rockets punted on an opportunity to get Cooper Flag. I honestly, this is how I view it, that the Rockets gave up a top 5 pick in 2025 as part of that deal. That's honestly how I'm viewing it. I think that's, and again, I would have made the trade. I want to make that clear. But to me, it's like, it can't just be framed as, oh, the Nets would have been a 30-something win team if the Rockets weren't willing to make this deal. I don't buy it. Even if they had Mikal Bridges, there's a chance that they just suck. Like there are a lot better teams. Like if Mikal Bridges, they weren't good last year. What was the pathway as currently constructed to them getting better this year? They didn't really have one. So that's all I'm saying on that.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm saying is Sean Marks is never going to tell us. There's no point arguing it anymore, right? Like he's never going to tell us.
I feel like we're not even really arguing.
No, we're not. I mean, we kind of are because we're talking about like whether or not this trade would have happened, right? Had their picks getting back, and like really, we're not going to know, right? No. Because
maybe when Marks gets fired, there'll be like a tell-all or something.
Perhaps, right? And like really, like we don't know what that ownership is thinking, and even if we knew what that ownership was thinking, who knows if that changes on a dime when they see the pure volume of draft capital coming in, right? Like, and they like owners, I know they pretend like they don't read Twitter. They read Twitter. If they see all the crap that we say about, like, they got all this from Mikal Bridges, like everything we were saying that night, I'm telling you that stuff influences ownership. So maybe even if like in his head he's like, you're really gonna have us at the bottom and we're gonna give up another top 5 pick again. After you read all that stuff, it's okay. Maybe that gives you more reassurance in the plan, right? I don't know. We're never gonna know.